Hello, it's Monday night, and welcome to Graphic Policy Radio, the show where comics and politics meet. We're the podcast for people who noticed that the Marvel Comics history column we run has a Howard Zinn joke in the title, and think that's a good thing. Joining me is actually the writer of said column, but real quick, here's what we're doing today. We're going to be discussing Avengers Infinity War. Thanos demands your Eros is my name for the episode. This means that tonight is our conversation around Avengers Infinity War movie. This is going to be a highly spoiler-laden conversation. We are going to assume that you have seen the movie if you're listening to this. If you have not seen the movie yet, you should go do that and then come back. So joining us to discuss the Marvel Cinematic Universe's biggest crossover to date, our guest experts are two fan favorites of the podcast, actually, who are both Marvel fans and have a bit of an academic bent. We have Stephen Attewell. He writes about the intersection of history, politics, and pop culture at the People's History of the Marvel Universe for Graphic Policy. In his day job, he teaches public policy at City University of New York's Murphy Institute for Labor Studies. He is the founder of Race for the Iron Throne, a blog about A Song of Ice and Fire. And also joining me is returning guest as well, Brandon Wilson, a Los Angeles-based filmmaker who teaches at UCLA and Columbia College Hollywood, where he is currently teaching classes on the history of critical analysis and a class on David Fincher. Wow, that would be really cool to take. Hello to both of you.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I saw the movie as soon as I was personally able to, which meant that I saw it. Actually, Stephen and I saw it together. We saw it at an ungodly late hour on Friday night, and I was plenty wired and energetic and energized by the movie. I had a really good time. I feel like overall, people from the geek world certainly are having a very positive response to this community and to the movie. And I do sort of think that, this podcast being who we are, we're definitely looking at this through the lens of people who have watched a lot of Marvel movies and are coming at it with that sort of background. I have actually been putting together my thoughts on what movies folks should have to see before they watch this for those who are not as involved, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I want to start us off sort of by asking, generally speaking, do you think that this movie was successful at being an entertaining film? And do you think this movie was successful at its other end in terms of getting people to be more interested and charged up with the Marvel Universe as a whole? Do you want to take that to start with, David? I would say that it's a successful film. I would personally rank it because, of course, where are we without our rankings of everything? I would put it around the number 6 slot. To me, I would. For me, it's starting at the top. The first Avengers, I'm very loyal to that one. Then Guardians, then Winter Soldier, then the original Iron Man, Black Panther, and then I would slide Infinity War there. I'm not loving it as much as a lot of people are, but I think it's pretty strong, and you just have to really applaud Marvel for the audacity of doing something like this that is a pretty huge cliffhanger. I was actually at a party. I saw it Thursday because here in LA now, Thursday 8:00 is becoming the time for the blockbuster to really make its debut. We've gone past the sort of Thursday night, Friday morning, midnight show to now it's Thursday at 8. So, and I usually don't do these. I usually will wait till Friday, but I'm teaching from 9 to 6 at Columbia College on Fridays these days. So I decided to do Thursday instead. And I had a feeling also that I wanted to be among the first to see it and not have it, not wait even 24 hours because I had a feeling this was going to be one you wanted to see right away. So I got to see it. I think the audience was kind of stunned. There was definitely gasps, I think, towards the end. I think it's a successful film. I think there are some things that I wish that are somewhat minor that I wish it had the directions that it had gone in. I think that it will
it's definitely what I'm noticing is what I'm very struck by is the lack of backlash. There's not the anger that one might expect when you have all these characters being killed off isn't there, but that may have something to do with the fact that these aren't the oldest characters. The original set of Avengers largely is unscathed. Maybe it's because it's the sort of second generation that's taking the hits, although people did respond. But I'm very struck by that. The fact that it just, again, it's easy to take pot shots at Marvel Studios, at superhero movies, at Disney. But this is a pretty bold move that they did, and I think they deserve credit for it. It could backfire. We'll see. It depends on what happens with Avengers 4. But I think it's a successful film, and of course I have a lot more to say, but I'll leave it there for now.
Stephen, what do you think?
I really liked it. I don't think it's perfect. There's a particular issue I have with kind of what happened with Thor that we'll get into. But I'm really impressed by the, as you said, by the audacity of it, by just leaving the audience with a huge, shock and not neatly pulling everything together. And that's sort of part of the audacity. One of the things that I wrote when I sat down to write something about it, that I think I still stand by after the second viewing, is it's not quite as fleet of foot as Civil War was in terms of balancing screen time and pace and making us feel like most characters got a fully realized arc. There are definitely some characters who got a lot more screen time and a lot more of an arc than other characters. But what we got instead, what was sort of what we got for the sacrifice, to use the idiom of the movie, is this amazing kaleidoscope of character interaction. And some of my favorite moments in the movie weren't so much the big fights, although the big fights were awesome, but like when Thor is just hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy and bouncing wordplay between everyone in the cast. There is this sort of emotional payoff involved in seeing all of these characters that, people have come to love finally get to meet and interact and, be sort of as amazed and confused and awestruck at the idea of a cinematic universe as, a lot of us have been for the past 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely would describe the movie as audacious as hell. I don't feel like it's not like an artistic triumph that stands on its own merits the way you would say Black Panther is. And I don't think it's a movie that's great outside of the context in which it exists, but that's fine. That's what we're here for, right?
Right.
And, as someone who's been watching all the Marvel movies, and I don't think you need to have watched all of them. I do think you need to have watched a good chunk of them, and I think that that's reasonable. I really did enjoy the movie, and I was incredibly impressed at the Russo brothers and the screenwriters, the ability to keep us engaged in a million different story threads and beats happening with characters from all over the place at once and to juggle them successfully. I'm not always going to agree with where they came down on who to emphasize and where to go with that, but it never felt like it was dragging. And the sort of the pacing consistently felt good, and you did get to check in with pretty much everyone that you wanted to know where they were, the exception, of course, being Valkyrie. The good news is that the Russos have announced that she did not die. Thank goodness, because I would have been out there with a fucking protest sign. Valkyrie did not die off camera. Anyway, so those things were all pretty darn impressive to me. And one of the things that I thought was really most impressive to me is this is a movie that killed a female character, and it mattered. The death of Gamora, I felt like, was completely earned by the storyline. Zoe Saldana acted the fuck out of it. She just was tremendous. And it was the sort, for a Marvel movie to kill a character, I'm not a woman of color, but to kill a character played by a woman of color and have it not feel like a fridging. And this is entirely based on the work of this particular film, right? Because there wasn't that much done with her, to be honest, in either of the Guardians movies. Really was impressive. And
there was a bit more in the second one.
well, I should have realized sooner that she was going to be killed based on the fact that she was getting so much screen time and development for the first time ever. But again, like, it was a death that mattered and it was earned. And they gave her a great swan song on the way out.
Yeah, and it's nice to see, daddy issues have really dominated the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's nice to see, a female character kind of wrestle with that for a change, just to sort of change it up. And I really thought that her bond with Thanos really played, and it absolutely deepened Gamora, and it makes you sort of look back on the films, the previous Guardians films, and sort of understand what she's sort of dealing with and coping with, and what's going on with her that she can't necessarily talk about. I think it in some ways, there was the sort of the douchey, that Landis kid, the douchey kind of feeling like, well, how come they haven't gotten together? And without really addressing it in a very on the nose way, you sort of understand why she's kept Star-Lord at bay, at arm's length, because she knows that stuff's going on with Thanos. They've known that he's making moves, and that he's not just sitting on his throne. He's actually, they've known this was coming, just like, more than probably the other characters in the universe. So it gives her a lot more dimension, and you understand why she's made that choice. And all of that, and the scenes with her and Star-Lord were very affecting, very, and a lot of earned emotion. And now, of course, the debate is raging since we're all assuming we're going to get a lot of resurrections in Avengers 4, will she be among them? I guess there's just the feeling that because she did not perish by the stone, that although the stone can bring back anybody it wants, but I guess there's some feeling that her death is going to sort of stick, if you will, and not be. And of course, I'm flashing back to when I was a tween and teenager reading comics and collecting the Marvel Universe handbooks. Gamora and Drax were in the Book of the Dead at the time. They had been killed off. I don't remember exactly the circumstances. So, for me, I can see, I've always sort of thought of her as someone who was kind of marked. Same for Drax. And, I've always thought of them that this is a very, that meeting their end was a very real possibility. So we'll see where they go with it. But it was, I'm glad she got her moment. I love the hangout aspect of it too. And in fact, I kind of wish it was just a solid 3 hours and we had more time to just hang out, like a late Howard Hawks film where you're just kind of enjoying being with these characters. I thought that Cap and Black Widow, I really wanted to know a lot more about what the hell they've been doing for the last 2 years, what's been going on. But, I also know that they really wanted it to move, and they really wanted to get to that killer sort of ending. And I understood why they didn't, but I would totally have been happy with at least 15 to 20 minutes more of them just sort of catching up, frankly.
So,
I think the movie did a great job of matching up characters to have interesting dynamics and relationships and conflicts with each other. Steve, you were saying?
No. Let's go on to this. We'll circle back around to my thing, because mine's more like theory, speculation for what comes next.
Oh, yes, I know. I have so much to say on this. So, in terms of who met who, I do think that a lot, I would have, having Shuri meet Bruce is in many ways the most gentle introduction to white dude science bros that she could have had in the Marvel universe. And
right.
I'm in the end of the day, I'm kind of glad that that's what it was. As opposed, I know a lot of people would just wanted her to go smack down Tony and have an encounter with him, but I actually think that it was totally cool to just have her be the way she was with Bruce. Were there particular combinations of characters that each one of you guys were just like, oh, I'm so glad this happened? I think the entire cast of Guardians of the Galaxy falling in love at Thor, with the exception of Star-Lord, who of course is you're in the same territory as me, there can be only one, was a very smart call of the role each one of those characters plays within their friend circle, frankly, as well. But what do you guys think about the matchups?
Yeah, I thought they were really well played. I will just say my one. I just will air my one grievance that I'm really sorry and annoyed that the Defenders couldn't have a cameo in this. In the sort of early New York scene with helping guard the sanctum, but of course we understand that can happen. I'll move on.
I do want to just say
one
thing about that. When Tony is cordoning off the city when the aliens first show up, Tony says specifically, "Get rid of everyone south of 40th Street," and I just was like, they specifically said that so that Hell's Kitchen would not be impacted by the storyline. I was like, let me look on this map. How can we make sure to keep Daredevil out of this? I will say nothing. Everything short of Hell's Kitchen is being cordoned off for this fight right now. Thank you very much.
And it's just it's a completely. That was an organic way for them to just be there. That would make perfect sense. But oh well. I mean, I'll never get over it. I actually wore my Defenders T-shirt the second time I saw it. The first time I dressed like an adult, but the second time I actually wore my Defenders T-shirt just in my quiet protest that they're being excluded from the big get together. I guess you really had to have Tony and Strange. It's not the most fun matchup because they're these two alpha male pricks, and they're going to, of course, sort of just constantly butt heads, and they come from these very different worlds, and they both feel like their expertise is really important. But it was nice to see sort of Spider-Man between them. That really played well. Again, I liked. I just really wanted more of the sort of the Commando Avengers. I wanted more. I wanted to know more about Cap, Black Widow especially. What they've sort of been up to, and I know we've got sort of bigger fish to fry, but I was. That's the one where I thought we had a lot of missed opportunity. And of course, we finally got our they finally committed to the Wanda and Vision love story, which kudos to them again. I wasn't sure they were going to go there, but they went there.
And the film did something smart with that because they actually, by introducing that love relationship by having Paul Bettany's human face. Is the only way, let's be real, to sell this weird android as being someone that a human would be in love with. They were like, oh, he's handsome. And then you're like, oh, that's right, he's this android. But I would think this is very deliberate and well played because it's kind of gross in some ways. I also want to say this, though. I don't think that Wanda has a personality in the MCU. What is her personality? I couldn't even tell you. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you give me time, I think I could come up with stuff. I mean, there's the whole sort of second half of a twin thing. She's definitely sort of a little bit less experienced and naive, especially in Civil War. Mm-hmm. Definitely, you get a sense here that she's something of a reluctant warrior. That she perhaps isn't as committed to being a Commando Avenger, similar to how Vision is, starting to have second thoughts about being a Tony Stark Avenger. But I have to say, man, when Elizabeth Olsen is weeping at having to, murder the man she loves to save the world, God, that really did play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, her performance was good. I mean, it was. Yeah, it just wasn't as developed as a character as I'd like. I mean, speaking of love, though, Bruce and Natasha wasn't disgusting this time, which is probably because they barely touched on it.
Well, they got a line.
Kudos for that. Kudos for that.
Single solitary line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess maybe we'll have to find out later. Black Widow supposedly has a movie in the works, and I don't know. Maybe we'll fill in some of the lost years here. I don't know, but it was interesting that they just didn't even really, not even a scene of them kind of catching up. It was just the hello, and that really was it.
Whose relationship is even more important and got even less time was Cap and Bucky. I know that Cap had seen Bucky more recently than Bucky had seen most of the other characters.
Right.
Cap brought him down there, but that was the most deflated, hey, what's up? But
bye,
like reunion of two characters I could imagine. And you know, I'm actually fine with this movie not spending that much time with Cap in general, because I know he's going to be a huge deal in the subsequent one, frankly. But I would have thought that there would have been a little bit more to the Cap and Bucky reunion, like just something. I can't help but sort of wonder if this is like a deliberate choice they made to just like spit on a fandom. I don't even fucking know, because it seemed just so, I don't know.
Yeah,
bizarre.
There wasn't much interaction between the Commando Avengers and kind of any of the other groups of characters, really. Like of all the groupings, like they, you know, outside of Bucky like swinging Rocket around, they didn't really have any contact with the Guardians. They didn't meet up with Tony's group ever, because, you know, they were sort of on their own side quest. And, you know, they did just in general get less airtime. And that's something that I'm sort of, you know, since they are most of the surviving Avengers, you know, hopefully that's something that will be, you know, rectified in the second movie. But, you know, I can sort of see like reasons for why they were doing some of this stuff. Like, obviously, you know, there's got to be a lot of time for Star-Lord and Gamora because of the way that her character acts as sort of a catalyst for the entire plot. Tony, I'm guessing, got more screen time because he is a little bit more of a an intersecting character between these groups. And also because I'm guessing the fact that he was deliberately spared by Doctor Strange means that he has a very important role in the next film. And then, of course, Vision and Wanda. And I think everyone else, you know, was kind of, kind of towards the back of the line. But yeah, in terms of interactions, like I also want to add, like, in addition to the whole Guardians of the Galaxy as a whole, I thought that Thor, Rocket, and Groot were a really good pairing. I would have liked to see more of Star-Lord and Spider-Man, because, like, their, you know, pop culture thing would have been really interesting. You know, everything that you know, Peter thinks of as a super old movie is for Peter. You know, those are the only movies he knows about.
Right.
Yeah, I really thought that was a really cool to have them connect over, and the other thing is, you know, Tony spends a lot of time with Spider-Man, and Spider-Man had a lot happening in this movie, in particular, which I thought was wonderful. He's such a great and charming actor, and his jokes were so well done. And it was, I didn't cry during this movie, and I would have thought I would have. It's not a criticism, but it's an observation. I don't know if it's just because I know how things are going to resolve themselves. I mean, look, I don't think Loki is coming back anytime soon. I think Loki's going to come back maybe years from now, right? Like for like a cameo or something. But Loki dying was sad, actually, but it didn't quite get me in the tears the way a couple of the other movies have. I actually was not surprised at all that Loki died early in the movie. I don't know why in particular that felt like it was something that was bound to happen. And, you know, like I said, I do think Loki will come back, but a long time from now and at the actor's leisure. I don't want to get too close to talking about predictions for the future. I have many of those. But let's talk a little bit about Thanos. I want to, in our last episode of the podcast, I was talking with my guest, James Hancock, about the comics that were behind the movie, things like Infinity Gauntlet and Thanos Quest. And in those comics, Thanos is an MRA. He's like an incel, quote, involuntary celibate. He's a sexist bro who is trying to kill half the world because Death, who is female embodied in the Marvel Universe, he wants her to sleep with him. So he's going to kill half the world to get her to sleep with him. I was really looking forward to that because that's such a super, immediately political thing to deal with. But instead, we have Thanos that has a different political motivation, which is also certainly timely and worth discussing. I just want to quote really quickly a couple of wonderful tweets that I pulled up from the internet. To quote Daniel Ballo, wasn't Thanos a member of the ruling family of Titan? Quote, killing rich and poor alike. Quote, my ass, that's not fair. Not everyone on Titan was equally responsible for the environmental devastation and unsustainable use of resources. Fuck Space Prince William. And William Jamal Richardson said, y'all calling Thanos' reason for killing half the universe absurd and a plot hole when IRL, Europeans, hoarded enough material resources to feed 10 to 15 billion people, but chose to let half the species starve and complain about people having babies. Thanos is just a capitalist. So, yeah, Thanos is zero population growth racist. There we go. What did you guys think about Thanos?
So let me just say, I saw the film Thursday evening, and I went back last night. In between that, I listened to your episode with James Hancock, and I really, really enjoyed it because I learned a lot about the, Jim Starlin for me is the writer of Batman. That's kind of where that's where I kind of encountered him as a comic book reader, and I really missed the sort of all of the stuff as a reader when it was all happening. Because either it was before my time or when I took a sort of college age hiatus from reading comic books. So I learned a lot from that, from listening to you guys talk, and what you bringing up Thanos as a pickup artist. It kind of crystallized as I'm sitting there in the gym listening. I'm like, that's it. That's what is missing from Infinity War, is that there's just no crackling subtext as you get in like. Really, most of the Marvel MCU films, and certainly this really hot streak that they've been on, there's something in all of them underneath. I mean, Black Panther, it's barely underneath. It's pretty much what the film is about all these issues of race and of the Black diaspora, the African diaspora, and so forth. And then the class rage of Spider-Man: Homecoming. The colonialism discussion in Thor Ragnarok, and it's like it gives these films that extra juice to just make them really engaging. And with Infinity War, we have this. It didn't come across to me like, yes, Thanos has a certain philosophy behind what he's doing that you can argue, but I really feel like and I totally get why they didn't want to have to deal with a female embodiment of death, especially not after just having Cate Blanchett as the goddess of death, and then that might be confusing, and you're not going to get Cate Blanchett back for Infinity War. So I understand why they made the call not to eliminate that, but at the same time, yeah, it really kind of puts a whole different spin on the character. And I really think in the age of Me Too, to present Thanos as this guy who's willing to cause all this pain and suffering on a just kind of unfathomable level because he feels entitled to this woman. I mean, obviously that would have really kind of given it that extra sort of bit of gas in the tank. But so that was interesting for me to sort of hear that and sort of understand the character that way coming from that, because it definitely, I somewhat, now that I'm sort of looking back on it, I feel like maybe that was a missed opportunity. But again, I understand that, this is a risky film already, and maybe that just was, a bridge too far, just one thing, one ornament too many on the tree, and so they just sort of just streamline it to, there's too much life and it causes suffering, even though, yes, that doesn't totally stand up to reasoning. But then again, hey, he's the Mad Titan. I mean, what do you want from him? He's not going to be. I think there's a certain license that his reasoning is flawed because he's Thanos. Interesting though how Brolin plays Thanos with this sort of sexual swagger. He's a very sexual sort of, and maybe that could just be Josh Brolin. That may not be anything, he just may be, right. It may not be on the page. It may not have been anything that either of the Russos told him to do, but it definitely kind of comes across, that Thanos, you definitely feel like, yeah, that guy, he, to quote Silicon Valley, that guy, he fucks that guy, so yeah, you definitely feel that, even though they chose not to. So it's there, the connection between sex and death you feel it. But yeah, it would have been interesting if they had played it up a little more.
I was wondering, my sort of thinking about the shifting from the sort of incel thing is I don't know whether that motivation would have worked for a villain protagonist, which Thanos, I would argue, is in this film. That he's the driving force of the action. He's usually a step ahead of the heroes. He sees himself as the hero, as like the only sane man in the universe who wants to save the world. And he's got his little like collection quest, his hero's journey. You can chart all the sort of, the down moments and the up moment and all that are definitely there for him. And, I as sort of crazy as his sort of population control, elitist, kind of enviro shtick is, like, you at least get the sense of him as a sort of idealist fanatic, and that kind of plays. I think equally the important thing, and I haven't seen so much of this, is you also got the sense of Thanos as this kind of abusive parent figure.
Yeah.
That, especially when the scene with Gamora and Nebula and him, where he's, torturing one of his children in order to make the other child, tell him what he wants to know. And the way that he sort of, spins these sort of justifications around Gamora about, the best part of you is me, I really love you, it hurts me so much that you say these things. And then, by contrast, when he's talking with Nebula, it is just nothing but contempt. It is the sort of the abuser unmasked. And especially the bit where, she fights him on Titan and he just says, killing you would have been a waste of parts. It's like, how dehumanizing can you be? Where, you're saying to someone, your hate is so inconsequential, you're not worth killing.
Right.
And I really expect, based on the comics particularly, like there's really huge room for Nebula to do amazing things in the next movie. I do think a certain number, I think obviously Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers is going to be doing a lot, but I hope that they use Nebula wisely as they have in the comics, because she's like, in the comics, Nebula ends up being the hero for at least a little while, and I thought that was cool. And it was her being tortured was just really brutal, and you definitely just see how she was used to manipulate her sister the entire time.
And I think this is interesting also because of the what they're doing aside from Thor Ragnarok. There's a real interesting. Marvel clearly hears, looks at Twitter and hears the comments and knows that people criticize the villains, and they have really just gone to town on improving that. And one of the things they've done is they've really kind of moved away from they've created increasingly more sympathetic villains. Even the Vulture, was really just kind of surprisingly sympathetic, because of his backstory, and of course Killmonger, who I think, frankly, a lot of people who are used to watching sort of typical standard American fare were kind of disoriented by having a villain who's making a point, who has a point, even if his the way he executes that point is sort of problematic. And that really was almost sort of, I think a lot of people who just watch American films modern contemporary American films, I should add, because of course, if you watch 70s American films, you see that kind of thing all the time. But, and again, kudos to Marvel, because moral ambiguity is usually the thing people like William Friedkin, who of course loves to, dismiss the superhero film.
And who's on Twitter, actually.
Yeah, and he is. Yes, I know. Yeah, and he that's the thing he wrote in on is what made the '70s cinema so great, and so you get it here, and now we've gone pretty much in a way. Thanos is almost an obliteration of this line between sort of hero and villain, and he is really the protagonist. They even winked as much at the end by saying Thanos will return rather than the Avengers will return, and he's the guy at the end. It's him who sits contented and right. I mean, it's a very sort of radical film, and in some cases, I know my wife was a little disturbed by how much that the film gets you to identify with him, and and that it's almost too much to humanization of him, and for someone who's essentially out to. I don't know. It's not exactly genocidal if you only want to kill half, right? So it's like semi-genocidal, I guess. But it's almost. I think it does kind of raise this question of like, are we completely just erasing the line between hero and villain? Because of course we've been doing that slowly in the superhero film, DC included, for the last couple of years, and now where we are right now as a country, it is kind of an interesting thing to consider what's going on.
Huh. I usually would agree with your wife in terms of finding it really exhausting that they feel like they need to give us these, villains for us to that the audience ends up over-identifying with and romanticizing with in ways that actually bring additional value to values that are fucked up values. I didn't feel that about Thanos, and maybe it's because I was already familiar with the character, but I didn't find him like charming or like seductive in his arguments the way Killmonger completely is, right?
Right.
I didn't feel like Thanos bridged that to me, but I see what she's saying. I mean, my only thing is I think the original Marvel villain, well, not really the original, one of the early Marvel villains is Loki, right? And Loki was the character who was given the most complete turnaround, predominantly because the audiences loved him so much and demanded to see more of him, and that's what it took to bring him back.
Right.
Yeah. Right,
and you do, it's a very complicated thing when you watch him killed because, on the one hand, you're like, it's a character you've come to have some affection for, and then you remember the first Avengers where, he tried to destroy, commit mass murder and take over the world, and he's done a lot of nasty things. So it's very interesting that how many of these characters you come to have very complicated relationships to, and I think that's actually a good thing, and it's something that I would applaud Marvel for. And it is highly ironic that this is being done in comic book films when, again, it's just such an easy target to make. Oh, it's just a comic book film and this and that. Just much the way people dismiss westerns and often say, oh yeah, it's a western, white hat, black hat. It's like, which westerns are you watching though, my dude? I mean, it's like there's a lot of westerns, and actually the best one where it ain't white hat and black hat, and it's actually it can be, and really, and that's really what it is. I mean, they're sort of doing our westerns in a way where there's this mythology that is incredibly malleable, that is incredibly able to sort of go into these different places and reflect where we are. And that's the other thing about the film that I was really left with is how much it just kind of captures Trump-era despair in a way that is to walk out with that was without the catharsis, because you just can't have it yet. This is sort of the mid-story beat down, and we're going to have to wait a year to get anything else. But it just was like, reminded me of Election Day almost. Like, did that really just happen?
I mean, people were saying it's dark, that it was like the series Empire, but this is darker than Empire Strikes Back. This was 100% darker than Empire Strikes Back.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, he didn't kill Luke. He just cut his hand off. But right.
I mean, Stephen and I were in the theater together, and I definitely, like, the people sitting near us, I don't know if they just weren't familiar with, like, comic book logic or what, but they definitely seemed to think that everyone who was dead was going to be dead. Mm-hmm. It was hard for me to... It's hard for me to be like, wait, is that what people are going to think watching this movie? And it really made me feel like there's a significant chunk of the audience who will actually think that T'Challa's dead. And he's not, right? We
Right.
know that that the gauntlet is going to get reversed and he'll be brought back, and we know this in part because there's another movie that's supposed to be coming, and we know it in part because the one that happened made so much damn money.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's a significant chunk of people who will be dismayed and kind of disgusted by the African hero being killed and will not be waiting around to see what happens next.
I have not so far, and I'm on Twitter a lot, and it's not foolproof, but from what I'm seeing and from talking to people, and I'm talking to students, I work at a high school 4 days a week when I'm not teaching at Columbia. That's not the sense I get, that people are kind of disgusted or feel betrayed. Their minds are sort of, their world is a little bit rocked, and I think I have had to tell some people privately, like, they're coming back, right? You get that, and I think there are some people who, at least in the first 48, 72 hours, were really unsure. I've also seen people on Twitter saying, do you really think that after all the money Black Panther made, that they're really going to let that guy stay dead? And I guess some people thought, oh, well, they didn't know he was going to make that much money. But yeah, I do think that there's probably some people who are thinking that and are unsure, and people are reaching out to find out, like, well, is this for real? It is, but it doesn't seem like people are particularly bothered, or they're just kind of going with it. There are a lot of people who are feeling things and were really kind of devastated by it. But, honestly, I wonder how much of it Game of Thrones is sort of teaching people to, like, take brutal, these kind of brutal turnabouts and just kind of take them in stride and just know that the story's not over. It's just, there's clearly, everyone knows there's another Avengers film coming out. So maybe on some subconscious level, people just know, well, there's more to this story, apparently. And and that's what's so interesting about Infinity War is, as I've heard it described, that it is in some ways the most comic booky thing that Marvel's done. Because yes, it's like, what's more comic booky than watching a major character get killed, and that's at the end of an issue. And it happens. I think almost all of the great characters have been dead at one point or another. And of course, the source material, did just that. But that I find that really interesting. That it's like people are getting that sort of crash course on this sort of comic book logic, who maybe don't, and they've only gotten it through the movies, which have sort of mitigated it somewhat and not gone the whole sort of comic book way. But now we're finally here to this sort of uncut, undiluted comic book where characters are being dragged into spaceships and going to the moons of Saturn and having battles there. It's like we've come this in 10 years exactly from Iron Man, which could basically happen essentially if technology allowed it, to something that this is this big. So it seems like people are sort of just trusting on some level, innate level. They're just going to trust that somehow this was going to work out. But yeah, it's I just feel bad for people who brought small kids and didn't know. I have a 6-year-old whose three of his favorite characters are Star-Lord, Spidey, and Tony Stark. But I just knew.
That's rough.
I just knew. I think and I told them. We're just gonna have to wait on that, sweetheart. I don't think you want to see this. But no, I saw a tweet about someone who had brought up someone my son's age, 6, in their Spidey costume, and the kid was just kind of like, "Is this real?" At the end, as a parent, that's what I was thinking all the time, because I knew, and I've been telling everyone, do not bring anyone under. Let's even say 9, unless it's a really savvy 9-year-old that's the youngest. You probably don't want to bring them to this, which is also interesting. And of course, with the comic book movie, this whole thing comes up about who's it for? Is it for the kids? Is it for the adults? The obnoxious kind of preening about comic books movies not being for kids, which just seems kind of absurd. And then Marvel's sort of now moving into this sort of same territory with this one. I've tried my best to let everyone know, like, please don't take the kid to this one. Let them. They'll catch. You maybe just want to skip this one, and maybe even Avengers 4, come to it later. But wait for Ant-Man and the Wasp, because I think that one's going to be a lot more. My kids, he's really hyped for that, so it's all good. As long as he's really, really excited about that one.
The giant Pez dispenser got him, huh?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So let's hope that it doesn't end with Paul Rudd turning into ash, but we'll see.
I'm sure it'll be fine. He's immune to the ravages of time, as we know in real life.
Yes,
so
yes.
Therefore, his character can't die. I'm hoping that they have Shuri be Black Panther for a little while before T'Challa comes back. I don't know that they will. I don't know if they like money enough to get over themselves to let that happen. But I think that would be amazing to do that. I think that having Black Panther get dissolved was a strategic error because it's going to delay their ability to do another movie with him.
Right.
Also, frankly, I mean, he would have had a huge emotional impact if it was Okoye dying, disintegrating.
Although I wonder how much of that is due to the fact that it seems like they really want Ryan Coogler back.
Mm-hmm.
And they I saw something on IO9 or one of those sites in which they're basically saying there's no hurry, you come back when you want to do Black Panther 2,
right.
We can wait a little bit, as opposed to sort of saying, you need to sign on the dotted line right now or we're moving on to someone else.
Yes, because he's trying to do the film about the Atlanta testing scandal. So I know that's his next project with Michael B. Jordan, which sounds fantastic. As a teacher, I can't wait to see that. So you're right, it does give him some time to make another movie. I think with the 2-part film, which this is still, it's funny how they've gone at such great lengths, because finally the public just got sick of the so-and-so part 1 and part 2. So they quickly scotched that. Okay, it's not Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and 2. This is just Infinity War. The next one's just something different, which is come on, dude. It's going to pick up pretty quickly right after. This is a cliffhanger. This is a 2-part film. It's okay. I mean, this is at least you're not just taking one story and breaking it into 2 because it's the last. That was really obnoxious, and I'm glad people sort of turned on that. But I think that because of that 2-year sort of window, it's sort of built in. I don't even think if Black Panther hadn't died, it doesn't change their timeline any. I was very surprised that he went and not Okoye, and that Okoye was left. And actually that was kind of cool that Okoye was one of the survivors, because she's already sort of becoming this sort of she's becoming pretty much a hero alongside everyone else. I loved seeing her in the R of the Marvel and the end of the opening credits, and I loved how quiet it was. You didn't get the fanfare. You knew right away this is different. This is gonna be something different from what we've seen, in the moodiness of hearing it go silent. But anyway, I was struck by seeing her at the very end of the Marvel vanity plate there, and seeing her really kind of front and center. So. I was very surprised that he went. But again, when Black Panther and Spider-Man go, at that point, okay, so these people are coming back, because they're working on Spider-Man 2 as we speak, or at least the script, and that's on the books. The Guardians is a little, you don't know, because the Guardians, that's a group, and so it could be it could be Rocket and a whole new team. It won't be, and they already set up.
They could get Sty Stallone and his alternate crew.
Right. They should bring back their wife Michelle Yeoh, but that's another story.
Yes.
She had one line.
Yeah, hopefully they will expand her a bit, because she certainly deserves it and deserves to be front and center. We will see. One thing I wanted to say is, and I'm as I said, I'm teaching a class on David Fincher right now, so of course this is the goggles through which I'm viewing things. But I told my Fincher class, so we met on Friday after 2, and this is I know some of them had seen it, a lot of them hadn't, and I said, you know what, actually, it's kind of like the Marvel movie David Fincher would make. And I couldn't go it with, because I'm not spoiling, but the fact that it opens with survivors of Thor Ragnarok slaughtered, that harkens back to Alien 3, which was considered one of the no-nos. You can't starting an Alien film, killing the survivors of the previous Alien film in the credits, which effectively there's no the pre-credit sequence where most of them although we are meant to understand that some of the Asgardians have survived or maybe were jettisoned in escape pods or what have you, even though it looked like they were all dead to me. Also, just the ending. I mean, it's just something that I could totally see him getting behind. His famous quote, which one of the books I'm using is called "Films That Scar." Him saying that I don't even know that I think movies should entertain. I prefer the films that scar. So yeah, it's like almost it doesn't maybe have the style, the stylistic panache of a Fincher film, but I could see this is this is definitely the superhero film he would make, because it's such an interesting study on how heroes can fail, and it's not because of their human foibles, and Star-Lord can't control his temper and all that, and all these little things that match up, and it ends up that they can't make it, and that possibly the failure is part of the process. They have to fail now to be successful later. So yeah, I found that really kind of an unexpected connection to make with this and Mr. Fincher.
I do want to tee off very quickly about the Thor Ragnarok thing, just because my one critique of the film, and I'm going to keep an open mind for number 4, is that it feels like a lot of the character work that was done in Thor Ragnarok and a lot of the thematic work, the refugee Asgardians, don't get to a new home, they get wiped out. His repaired relationship with Loki ends brutally. Thor gets a new eye and a new axe to sort of replace,
right.
It's like Dumbo gets a new magic feather instead of, learning that he had the power.
Right.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I'm, willing to extend the benefit of the doubt, but I think, and, we'll get into this when we talk about thinking about the future. I think they're going to need to the extent that they row stuff back, they might need to row stuff back on this, because otherwise I wonder if you're going to be able to get and keep talented filmmakers like Taika Waititi back if they feel like their work is going to be undone immediately after it's finished. Now, maybe some people won't care, but I do feel like, if I was a director, that would kind of get my back up.
Yeah, I actually did wonder. I mean, of course, he's not gonna take to do a Kanye style tirade or anything. But yeah, I did kind of think about that. Wow, what he must have known, of course, had some idea of this making the film. But right, it is very interesting that everything he set up and Korg and everything, and then just boom, it's gone. Right, just before the movie's even started. That's all been wiped out, and I don't even know. Thor to me is the most curious sort of sub franchise, because they've clearly kind of rediscovered him at this late date, and it seemed like he was they were winding him up, and now it just seems like there's a lot more. They realize there's a lot of uncovered territory with Thor. Even though now there's no more Asgard, and much of his supporting cast has been sort of decimated. But Hemsworth is still having a blast, and clearly this working with Waititi seems to have restored his interest in his fire for the character. So it'll be very interesting to see if they go, do another Thor film, or if they just sort of bring him in the way the Hulk was brought in for Ragnarok. But also, of course, Tessa Thompson's character was so popular. It'll be interesting to see where they go, because it seems like the Thor is ready to take his place amongst the sort of pantheon, pass into legend, and but it seems like doesn't feel like he's ready to do that yet. So, and it was fun to see him to get this sort of oh yeah, you guys are in trouble now slot, which I always feel like Thor has constantly been, to borrow my 18-year-old's favorite word, has been nerfed a lot of this series, that Thor is sort of underplayed his strength. They underplay his strength and his power, and now finally it feels like, yes, Thor, he shows up, that's a game changer right there, and the new axe comes through the Bifrost and starts wiping out everybody. So it's cool to see him finally sort of come into his own. So it'd be, I hope that we have more than one more film with him.
Well, let's talk about predictions. I mean,
yes.
I really do think ultimately, look, this is what happened in the comics. I feel like a version of this will happen. Somebody else gets control of the gauntlet and rolls back time. I think in the process of this, making this happen, we will have many of the characters who are alive now die for real.
Yeah.
Resetting the people who got dissolved back to life again, right?
Right.
I would love to see Nebula, who they actually did a better job of developing now, have a role like the one she did in the comics of being the person who does that. I don't know how much of that will be her. Obviously, Captain Marvel, in case folks didn't pick it up, Captain Marvel was being beepered by Nick Fury at the end of the movie's second post-credits sequence. And I love that it was a pager because the whole point is she disappeared in the 90s. Carol disappeared in the 90s, so they had to use a pager to reach her. I love that.
That's very funny. Yeah, that's really good.
And so those are the main things that I have in terms of predictions. I really do think those who are dead will rise and those who are alive will fall is going to be a big reversal. What do you guys think is going to happen next, and what did you think of the choices they made in the ending? Stephen?
Well, I mean, I do agree with your overall thesis. I think it's not an accident at all that the people who are left are overwhelmingly the sort of the OGs, and whose contracts are coming to an end, and most of the people who died are the newer folks who have upcoming movies. So I think they'll probably do a switcheroo of some kind. I'm firmly of the belief that a lot of this is going to be done through forms of time travel, because I felt like almost to go to a different filmmaker, Christopher Nolan, right? The Prestige, right? There's the Pledge, the Prestige, and the Reveal, and they really set it up for us that Doctor Strange will stop at nothing to defend the Time Stone. He will not give it up for any reason. And then he looks into the future and he finds the one way to do it. And then all of a sudden he goes completely back on what he said before and, hands Thanos the Time Stone. It's like, hey, no trick. And so I think we're going to get a lot of time travel, not just within the events of this film, but I think they're going to do their to the extent that they can do a victory lap through the whole Marvel franchise. Because that would be the thing to blow people's minds in the second film. The first film is okay, we've killed everybody. Second film is we are just going to take a victory lap through our whole fucking franchise because no one can do this like us.
Back to the Future Part 2 kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
To the scenes of that, right.
I love that prediction. I just really hope that it doesn't end up with Doctor Strange being the big hero because that's the last character that I need to see encased in gold as the great hero of us all.
I agree with everyone's predictions. Totally, yes. It was not lost on me that the OGs are left standing and the people who are presumably the future of Marvel Studios fell, and that's going to get reversed. I also think it's all going to come down to Tony, and he will be the Nebula. It's not for nothing. Are they the two people that are left on Titan? It's Tony and Nebula who have to figure out find a ship and head back to Earth. So
shit, you're right.
Actually, they do have a ship.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right though. It's Tony and Nebula together. Good God.
Right.
Good job. Good job.
So they've got her ship, and then the Milano presumably is there if the moon didn't crush it. But one way or another, they're going to get off of Titan and head back to Earth and start dealing. Right. So it's going to be sort of the two of them who have to make the big sacrifice. Also, let's remember Tony envisioned a child with Pepper. and so if he gets the gauntlet, before he makes that big sacrifice, he can just retcon an 8-year-old wisecracking boy genius with hair somewhere between blonde and dark, and then he can say goodbye to everything. And
oh my God, that would be a crazy backwards brick joke of like the Maudlin kid from Iron Man 3 is a creation of the fucking Infinity Gauntlet. That would blow my mind.
So
I didn't see Iron Man 3. That's the one I haven't seen. But wow, okay.
Yeah.
It's Shane Black. It's pretty good.
He cannot just go and like create some kid and leave it with his girlfriend, because she did not say that she wanted to have a baby right then.
She didn't, but if
make the assumption, or that she would want to do this solo. She might not. We don't know.
Right.
Oh my! It would be very Tony, but like, fuck you, Tony. It'd be very.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, she's been used to raising a child on her own for however long she's been working for Tony Stark.
Yeah, right. Just a younger kid, right? But so that's what I'm seeing. So yes, I think Strange has already done his big. He'll have more to do, but he's already sort of unbeknownst to everyone, sort of done thrown the long pass. And totally. My wife and I caught that the first time, and the second time it was absolutely clear that that's what Cumberbatch was working with. That this has to happen, but this is the this is the end game, and this is the next step. And I know this is you're going to. I know there's a reason why I'm saving you, because you're the one who's going to, because it all started with Tony, and then so this phase will end with him.
I did see another interesting theory, which is that, because we saw the soul of Gamora in the Soul Stone, that it's possible that everyone that Thanos killed with the snap is also in the Soul Stone. Right. So that could be like, you could have sort of one plot, which is like Doctor Strange and like time travel weirdness. And you could have another plot, which is like everyone in the Soul Stone. I'm just, again, thinking about like kaleidoscopes, right? What's another way that you could like jumble all these characters together is like take everyone who died and like have them have their own fight in this sort of like, I don't know, Infinity Stone verse, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It's called Soul World. It's called Soul World in the comics. But there is no Don Cornelius, unfortunately. I would love for him to be the ruler of Soul World.
I'm kind of relieved. I'm relieved that the Soul Stone wasn't in Wakanda, because that would have been just a bit much. But
there were a lot of predictions of that.
Right.
Oh no, really? Oh no.
Right.
Well,
people
in David F. Walker's comic with Luke Cage and Iron Fist, they have something called the Super Soul Stone, which is an item of, quote, hood magic that gets stolen by Black Mariah. It's a whole thing. But I was like, oh, God, the Super Soul Stone is kind of the best joke ever.
So speaking of sort of like characters arriving a little bit late on the scene, one of the things that kind of like blew my mind a little bit that I just this minute thought about is, given the way that Adam Warlock was like previewed at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, it's going to be really fucking hilarious if they bring him in for Guardians 3 and the Infinity Gauntlet's already happened. Like his whole raison d'etre in the comics is done.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't seem like he's going to be in 4. I mean, maybe they cast somebody and they're just being hush-hush. We don't know. But, it seems like if he was really a player in 4, would there be some sort of inkling or something? But I don't know. Is Adam Warlock just going to turn up in Guardians 3? And of course, it'll be very fun to see what happens with the stones once this is presumably Thanos is presumably defeated. What do we do with these stones? Who can be custodians of these things, and how do we make sure some warlord doesn't take them again? We'll see. Who knows if maybe that's where Guardians 3 goes. I'm not sure, but it seems that there's a lot of people wondering about Warlock and where he fits in. But again, who knows? I mean, Avengers 4, they've been pretty good about not letting us know anything whatsoever. including the damn title. So aside from the picture of Evans and Downey on set together, with Evans in the original, the first Avengers costume, and Robert Downey Jr. is wearing that sort of tracksuit thing. It's hard. So you don't know if it's like, is this time travel? Is this, Tony looks like now, but yeah, Evans could be the Cap of the first Avengers. So first Avengers film. So we don't know, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Apparently there was also a photo of Chris Hemsworth with his original long haircut. And apparently they've also recast Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter, to an older actress from the one playing her in the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp. So it may be like, one of the things I was thinking about is like, oh shit, what if they're going backwards and forwards and like to alternate timelines? Right. That would be just really out of there.
Yeah. Again, this is Avengers 4 is the finale. It is the victory lap. So right, to have them revisit the earlier films, if you would, yeah, definitely that totally tracks. That makes sense. It's just funny how just the almost erotic intensity with which people are regarding Cap's death. Like, it's just like, is he, and the fact that, and I love that he's sitting there at the end saying, "Oh God," and having everyone else is disintegrated around him, and it's like so many people that just like, "Oh, Cap's gonna die. Cap's gonna die." It's like almost, and now it's like it just built up to this like fear. He's gonna die. We're gonna see it, and he doesn't. So we will. I don't know how. The reversal definitely seems like that's very possible. Because it was very striking. Although Rocket is in there with the survivors of the old guard survivors, but I will see. Maybe Bradley Cooper's getting tired of this doing the voice work. I don't know.
I doubt it. Voice work is so much fun. How could he get tired of that? I mean, Rocket will.
And it takes nothing away from his life. He doesn't have to do a lot of press. He doesn't do a lot of press for them, and
doesn't have to do 1,000 crunches a day.
Exactly. Right. Like poor Star-Lord. Right. Leave him alone,
Fat shaming him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was like, did he gain just a little bit of weight just so that this would be funnier that he's standing next to Thor now? Because if you look at his face looks just a little bit rounder than it has in the past, but it's that played very well, and I'm very curious to see where that goes. Star-Lord is that one character. It's hard to imagine them not just dispatching him, but who knows? Maybe so. This was interesting.
I did see, speaking of fan backlash, the most I've seen is there are some people out there mad at Star-Lord.
Oh yeah, yes, I heard. I heard fucking Star-Lord as I was coming down the escalator from the. Yeah, that's true. If he doesn't die, they're gonna have to really he's gonna have to redeem him. If he's gonna come back, he's gonna have to redeem himself for that, because among the blunders that kind of cost, that allowed this all to happen, and of course Thor arguably did just as bad by not just
not going for the head.
Or hack that hand off. And then,
although he didn't do anything actively
right. He didn't blow the
right. He made an error, but it was not based on being a fucker. It was based on him not being the brightest sword in the thing.
And can I just say, I was not pleased with the design of Stormbreaker, and I just thought the whole thing of Groot's. I mean, it's a cute idea, but come on, really.
So sweet.
It was sweet. It is sweet, but come on. This is the hammer. Thor is going to be swinging this thing with all his might. It just, I need something a little more substantial than Groot. Groot's branch from Groot.
It's the power of Groot's love.
Well, I can't argue with that now, can I?
It's the same reason why Cap was not shattered into a billion pieces. Going mano a mano with Thanos. It's like it's. If your heart is true, then you have the strength of 10.
Yes, because it was definitely on Thanos' face. Why am I not crushing this guy? Right. That was I totally got that. There's something between maybe because Cap's heart and the Soul Stone. I don't know. Maybe the Soul Stone is the key to Thanos' undoing because it's the one that's I just get been as I research, that's the one that's the most sentient, has sort of a will of its own, and it almost is like
it's
that
special wisdom.
Right.
And how amazing was that deep cut?
Yeah.
What was?
The bringing back the Red Skull like that.
Oh, Red Skull,
I did not expect that at all.
Here's my failed prediction is that we were going to find out that Corvus Glaive was actually Red Skull. That was my my second. I knew we were getting rid of Loki right away. I could figure that out. But I thought Corvus Glaive. I knew somehow Red Skull was going to be in this. I thought it was going to be Corvus Glaive, and therefore Corvus Glaive might kill him and then reveal as he's driving the pike into him that it's actually Red Skull, and then 70 years later he finally did it. But no, that wasn't the case.
Along.
Right. But no, I dug that. It was such a great comic book thing to have this him as this race that's sort of haunting the Soul Stone. Right. That was a great touch, and that was not Hugo Weaving, by the way, who apparently wanted nothing more to do with the character of the franchise. Yeah, they got a sound alike and probably did something, cooked his voice to sound like Weaving, and they were able to
they hooked him up to the Peter Cushing machine, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And so it was pretty impressive because I didn't know. But
I thought it was real fun.
Yeah, I did too. My kid's friend said that texted me later because he went with us to see it and cleared that up. But so I knew Red Skull was coming back, but I didn't have the right. I didn't get the right character. I kind of felt that because him going up into space with the Tesseract before it was the Space Stone. I knew that somehow that he was going to turn up now.
Well, I thought the reveal with Peter Dinklage was like, it just took me a second, and I said, "Wow."
Oh yeah.
It was sort of a strange place for him to show up, but okay.
He got some funny lines. I was like, okay, you're having to like say some ridiculous shit about forging things in the heart of a star, and dying.
A British
dying is
what have to do again.
Well, I was gonna say like it kind of redeemed him a little bit from the Destiny voice work that he got so much shit for. But I really did love that joke about it's going to kill you only if I die. That's what killing you means.
Right. No, that was a great bit with having him be this giant dwarf and kicking Thor around. That whole scene worked. It was an interesting place for them to go, and it definitely gave it this, making Nidavellir, this space station, gave it this very epic quality, as opposed to just being part of the Asgardian continent, which now is no more. That was cool. And again, I think the Rocket and Thor camaraderie definitely was one of the highlights of the film. I always say that if they just did Rocket and Groot films, a series of those, they'd go over very well. Because as much as we love all the Guardians, and Mantis got a little the sort of forgotten Guardian. But she did a little bit better than she did certainly in the second film, and would have been very integral to the defeat of Thanos if Star-Lord hadn't been such a Sonny Corleone and screw up everything. But it was nice to see her get a real big part in that. So.
Actually, speaking of death, and this wasn't even like a sort of a death. The bit where Thanos uses the Reality Stone to like crumble Drax into like blocks, and the like weird leathery thing that he turns Mantis into, that freaked me. That like got me on weird like subconscious phobia level. Like, oh no, people should not be turned into fruit roll-ups. That's really wrong.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty artistic moment. I feel like there's a number of visuals from the movie that really stood out, and that is one of them. I'll tell you one thing that did not work for me is I thought the score was completely fucking boring.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
The only part of the score I liked is the bit where Thanos is coming in at Wakanda in the end, and the sort of the drums merging with his footsteps. I thought was kind of cool, but yeah, the rest not so much.
That was Alan Silvestri, who's having a late career renaissance since he originally did the score for, the thing he's most famous for is Back to the Future, and he got called up out of retirement, not retirement, but I haven't seen the guy's credit in quite a while. Spielberg asked him to do Ready Player One, and now here he is with Avengers. So it's kind of a cool little story. But yeah, I actually kind of found myself wishing they had just gone a completely different direction for the music here. I don't know, either just like a metal score or a Giorgio Moroder kind of thing. But yeah, the music didn't do a lot, but I guess it's Avengers, so you gotta have that fanfare going with an orchestra, and there's not much room for it. Maybe the next one they can do something a little more interesting.
I did like that we got one Guardians pop song. That was like a nice little moment.
Yes, and it was kind of a brilliant bit of like coding. You hear Rubber Band Man, and then you know it's a 70s song. And before when Banner is flipping the flip phone, and you cut to space, it does a great like okay, well, there we go. This is the Guardians because space plus some funky music. We know that's them, and that's pretty cool. That Gunn has created something that specific where it just goes. And I mean, it was also interesting reading about how much Marcus and Feely, the screenwriters, who looks like this may be their sort of final thing because they're moving on to work for the Russo brothers company. So it doesn't sound like they're going to stay. They've been like the workhorse screenwriters for Marvel, but it seems like this Avengers 3 and 4 might be it for them. But yeah, apparently they really had to sort of have sit downs with like Coogler, with Waititi, with Gunn, and really kind of make sure that what they were writing was consonant with what they had established in their solo films, which that's a really unique sort of challenge for a screenwriter of a blockbuster. It's like not only do you have to write something good, you got to make sure it checks with everything. And apparently there's something that Star-Lord did. It may be the gas that they were not sure about, and Gunn said yes to it, and so did Chris Pratt. They both agreed he would do this. So, and I'm presuming it's the fact that he lost his head and cost everything. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. That they are trying to respect everyone's sort of vision, and Waititi. Apparently, there's a gag. Waititi made a few jokes just off the top of his head that wound up in the script coming out of Thor's mouth. So in the film, I should say. Yeah. So there was an input. I mean, they're just so smart over there. Then they really they don't do the stupid Hollywood expedient things of figuring, oh, these fucking idiots will pay. They don't. It doesn't matter. Like they not to sound like too much of a fanboy, but I mean the Marvel Studios honchos. They really obviously they know that the audience really demands the best from them, and they really do their best to deliver. Fun fact: Joe Russo. Just one thing. Fun fact: Joe Russo was a year behind me in film school.
Oh, really?
Can you hear me?
Hello,
Alana, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. I think so.
I was just saying, Joe Russo was a year behind me in film school. And I had one single conversation with him because he dropped out about a month in. So as happens at film school, people drop out and they decide it's not for them. So I had one conversation with him late night in the sort of common area. We were both editing something about like Tarantino or whatever. And then next thing I knew, he was gone. And he took a short film with his brother and went to Sundance. And Soderbergh liked it, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I never knew. So one last thing I wanted to leave on is, you guys probably have a lot of friends who haven't seen all the Marvel movies. I know I do too. And I've been helping them about what they need to see before they see the movie. And I've been trying to keep it as minimal as possible. I think that I feel like my list definitely was Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Captain America, Civil War, which is basically an Avengers movie. And then Thor Ragnarok, which I realized I probably didn't have to put in there. I just like it so much. And Black Panther as the ones you have to see. Because the reason is, look, and the movie did such a good job of introducing Doctor Strange that you don't even need to actually watch Doctor Strange. The movie even introduces really wrong. The movie even introduces Wong really well. Don't need to watch Doctor Strange. You don't need to watch Spidey because people already know the Spider-Man origin story. And the movie just handles, okay, this is who Spider-Man is, and I guess he has a relationship with Iron Man of some sort, of a mentorship. That's all you need to know. And watching Guardians is completely unnecessary. Guardians 2 is completely unnecessary. Guardians 1 is kind of unnecessary because Peter tells you his origin story and Gamora's origin story when you first meet them, and all you need to know about them really is that they're space rogues. And you can tell that from the fact that when you meet them, they're like jamming out to tunes and going to go rescue somebody and debating whether or not they should take money or not. That's kind of it, right? So I don't know. What do you guys think folks need to watch or not?
I would throw the first Avengers on there.
Okay.
Just because, for one thing, as I was scrolling through Tumblr, people have been noticing that they're like shot for shot, callbacks. I might throw in, maybe the first Guardians or the second. I don't think you'd need both.
Definitely not
the second Guard. Well, actually, I think the second Guardian might work better because they did a lot of work with Nebula and Gamora and their relationship with Thanos in that film that they didn't do in the first one. Like, Nebula is not a very good character in Guardians 1. She doesn't have much characterization or backstory, whereas in Guardians 2, when they have that sort of like heart-to-heart / trying to murder each other moment, like, that's the first time where I really bought them as sisters. And like, I don't know, to be honest, if I would have like really bought what's, their scenes in this movie without having that like grounding.
Yeah, of course I've thought about this. And it's arduous for people to watch 18 movies, I guess. So I have totally thought about this. I'm going to go with the following. I'm going to start in chronological as time of release, not when the story takes place. I'm going to go, I think I would actually start with Guardians because that's our first proper introduction to Thanos. That's, it also sets up that it's, when they say, oh, Xandar's decimated and that look of, that Peter registers on Star-Lord's face, I think it's kind of cool if you know the sort of the how big the galaxy, the Marvel universe is at this point. That's kind of a good thing. As much as I adore the first Avengers, I think I would actually skip it and say go to Age of Ultron, only because of the vision that Tony has.
Oh,
and it's the beginning. It's the beginning of this thing of, that's the real sort of the first sort of foreshadow that something really terrible and huge is going to happen, and it's motivating, and Tony is completely haunted by it because, of course, he's the one, because he's our first hero in the story, and so he's carrying this. So I think I would go with Age of Ultron, even though it's a very flawed film and one of the definitely the weakest of the Avengers so far. And then next I would say Civil War, just so you understand like completely the stakes and that are the emotional state where they're picking up at this point, and how completely And Civil Wars, of course, is also a flawed film in many ways. And it's very clear that the Sokovia Accords are completely just, sort of being used all that we needed was to break up the Avengers. And
like the Beatles.
Yeah, exactly. And they haven't really done a lot with that, the Accords, or what that means at all. But again,
which they could have.
They totally could have, and they completely sort of, it's just been sort of dropped or forgotten, and doesn't come up in Spider-Man, which doesn't make any sense for it to not come up. But in any case, I think Civil War still there's a to know where these people were and where they left off. And I would keep it to those three. If I had to say a fourth, it probably would be Thor Ragnarok, and then you sort of really, because that's the Thor Ragnarok, and I tweeted this earlier, Elana saw it, that Thor Ragnarok is the only film that leads chronologically directly into Infinity War. Even Black Panther is really set 2 years ago, because a lot of most of the films since Civil War have been taking place in the immediate aftermath of Civil War, even regardless of the year of release. So the 2017 films, except for Ragnarok, are all sort of set earlier in the story, or earlier in time. So I think it's kind of important to do that. And honestly, Doctor Strange is somewhere in the middle for me as far as the overall ranking. And it's not a bad film, but we kind of didn't really need that film, to be frank. I mean, we kind of could have just introduced Doctor Strange in this film, and it would have been just fine. And of course, my other issue with Doctor Strange is I will never, ever, ever get over Keanu Reeves not being Doctor Strange. It just will never. I will never, ever be able to. And Cumberbatch is obviously a fine actor, but I just will never not in my head be seeing Keanu Reeves as his Strange. Having him go head to head with Robert Downey Jr. and they're both about the same age and have about the same length of career. That one I just can't get over. That's the one bit of head cast that I can't let go. But
I don't think that. Yeah. I don't think that whether or not a movie contributed to this movie's existence or success is really, is a rubric that I care about. But I definitely feel like, there was a lot of things about Doctor Strange that were not, well, whatever. Folks can listen to my Doctor Strange episode if they so choose. I definitely appreciated the movie sort of taking the piss out of itself, talking about, well, kid, there's a wizard and he's trying to steal a magic necklace, is a fun way to sort of lampshade what exactly is going on for new viewers as well, in fact. But yeah, I feel, I really love Thor Ragnarok, and that might not necessarily be required for this. It depends how brutal I'm going to be in my judgment for folks. It is immediately preceding this movie, but in some ways you're sort of open up with an explanation of what's happening now. You don't even need to know that Asgard was destroyed. You're just there was a ship full of people, of Thor's people, and they all got the shit kicked out of them by this evil guy. He must really be dangerous. That's sort of the point. I don't know, but I really love that movie. I feel like the more I talk about Thor Ragnarok, the more I feel like its political subtext was unfortunately too subtle for the audience, but it's still there, it's still there nonetheless. Yeah. Well, we're coming up on an hour and a half, so I want to just ask if you guys have any final thoughts about the movie that you wanted to share. Steven, do you want to hit us up? Anything? Don't feel like you have to.
I just, it holds up on a second viewing. I need to figure out some way to make sure that my younger brother goes and sees it. I don't know if I'd do it a third time. Maybe once it comes out on Blu-ray or streaming or something like that. I definitely, it is making me want to go back to my collection and start from Iron Man and just, reminisce with the characters.
What about you, Brandon?
I think that for me, I'm really, really interested to see how the inevitable resurrections are handled. It's going to be really tricky because bringing people back, on the one hand, it could make what we just went through feel like this cheap stunt, and maybe then people would be angry. And then, of course, this is kind of what comic books do. So there is an argument to be sort of truthful to that spirit. But I'm really curious to see how the resurrections happen, and if we really are, the people that are surviving end up being having to sort of swap out. So I'm very curious to see where they go. I hope that the fights are have a little more panache, and I think that with Coogler and Waititi, they really delivered such great. I mean, it's hard to beat Thor in slow motion, emitting lightning with Led Zeppelin. That's clearly one of the great moments of the entire MCU, and I really did kind of miss though Infinity War, you do kind of have this sort of stone in your stomach, no pun intended, throughout it. You do feel like this is really serious. This is not like everything else. There are consequences here. I do wish that the fights had been a little more. I mean, they're done well enough, but I just think that the bar has been really set for for cool fight scenes that really give you a sense of the characters' styles and who they are, about how they handle themselves in that kind of combat. And I hope the next one we get a little bit more of that than we did this time.
Cool. Well, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate your time. I keep forgetting to introduce myself at the beginning of the show. This is your host, Elana Levin, a.k.a. Elana Brooklyn. It's me on Twitter as Elana_Brooklyn. Where can our listeners find each of you guys on the internet? Brandon, you first.
Well, I tweet about quite a lot as Genius Bastard, one word, regular spelling, Genius Bastard. I also have a blog, geniusbastard.blogspot.com. So yes, please visit me there.
And Stephen?
You can find my work at Graphic Policy, at Race Free Iron Throne, at Lawyers, Guns, and Money, and on Twitter at Stephen Attewell.
Fabulous. And so anyone coming into this episode late, this episode will be on iTunes later tonight, SoundCloud, and Stitcher, and on our website, graphicpolicy.com, which you should check out every day for tons of comics, news, and reviews, and pop culture coverage. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Michelle Perez and Remy Boydell to talk about their new graphic novel, The Pervert. It's really fabulous. Quote, a surprisingly honest and touching account of a trans girl surviving through sex work in Seattle. Really interesting and powerful book, and also funny in places. So I hope you guys will join me then. And in the meantime, as we say, keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.